Good afternoon. My name's Sarah Sullivan, and I'd like to talk to you today about a disengagement strategy that we've developed to re-engage lost participants to the longitudinal study of parents and children, also known as ALSPAC, and children of the 90s. My name is Sarah Sullivan, and I'm Deputy Chief Operating Officer of the Children of the 90s and ALSPAC study. Just to give you a little bit of background to start with, so ALSPAC Children of the 90s study is a birth cohort based in and around Bristol in the UK and the southwest of England, as you can see on this map here. We recruited just over 14,500 pregnant women who were due to give birth between 1991 and 1992. The babies that were born to them are the original cohort children and are now about 30. So we've been collecting very rich data on these children over the last 30 years and also on their mothers and fathers. We're now recruiting the third generation of this cohort, which is the children of the original cohort children. This is very much a biomedical study. We collect data face to face, and our sample collection is gold standard. There are a couple of references under the map here which describe the cohort profile in much more detail in case anybody's interested. These are the generations that we are collecting data on. So as the original mothers, as I've explained, there's just over 14,500 of them, and the babies that were born to them, and then the children that are born to the original cohort children, so generation 2. So the parents, the mothers and fathers are called generation 0, then the babies generation 1, and the children of the children generation 2. This is just a little bit of information about ALSPAC. It's a large study. We have overall about 30,000 participants, and we've collected well over 1 million biosamples. We have probably more like 90,000 variables now, and we have 30 years worth of deep, rich data on these participants. We collaborate with over 1,000 researchers, and over 2,500 papers have originated from the data, from ALSPAC data. And we get about 18 proposals every month requesting data and or samples. So the problem we had was that we were setting up a new clinic in September last year, which we expect to run for about 2 years. And we were collecting data from the original cohort babies, so who are now about 30, the at-30 clinic, the G1s, and also on their parents, the G0s, their mothers and fathers. So we very much wanted to encourage attendance from people who disengage from the study over time. And we are defining this as people who have not taken part in any data collection over the previous 5 years, or maybe ever. And there's nearly 17,000 of them, which is about 53% of the cohort, so it's a very large group. About 57% of the G0 mothers are disengaged, 30% of the G0 fathers, and about 54% of the original cohort participants. Just to give you a bit more context on the disengaged categories, we split categories into 4. So group 1, which is the one we're interested in today, is people who haven't contributed any data for 5 to 10 years. Group 2, 10 to 20 years. Group 3, over 20 years. And group 4, people who've never contributed any data at all. And you can see some numbers here. We thought it'd be useful to find out something about the disengaged groups, which would help us to create a strategy to try to bring them back into the study. So interestingly, about 21% of them have a relative who is engaged with the study and does provide data. 44% of the G1 participants, the original children, were withdrawn from the study by a parent before they were 18. So now they're well over 18, there might be a way we could get them back into the study. A very small percentage, about 1%, just safeguarded. So by this I mean they have certain flags on their contact details because of sensitive circumstances or special needs. And this is to avoid cohort staff contacting them inappropriately, perhaps. 17% of them had said that they didn't want to take part in any clinics at all. So that's another group we perhaps needed to tackle. We also know where they live. About 75% of our cohorts still live in and around the Bristol area. And we identified 7 postcodes where the majority of our disengaged participants lived, so that was also useful information. We also found out a bit about them in that the original cohort participants had a mother who was younger when they were born, more men have disengaged, and they tended to come from a family with lower income and educational level. That's both the family and the participant. And they also were more likely to come from an ethnic minority group. As for the G0s, they were younger when their child was born, also from lower income and educational groups, and also more likely to come from an ethnic minority, and in fact have a higher BMI. So just to stress the importance of trying to re-engage people that have dropped out of cohorts. So scientifically, only collecting data from people who are engaged in the study does create what we call a selection bias. And this is because people who are well engaged in studies are always different from people that become disengaged. You can also end up with a smaller sample size, which gives reduced statistical power to detect small effect sizes, and also gives more imprecise results, which are medically much less useful. Less healthy people are always more likely to disengage from research, especially longitudinal research. And that means that you get findings that are less representative of the population at large. So we developed a two-phase disengagement strategy to try to tackle this problem. Phase one is now complete. We got ethics approval to do this from our own ALSPAC Legal and Ethical Committee. And phase two is coming up, and we'll need to go back to the ethics committee for that. But just to start with phase one. So to start with, the way the clinic was set up. So we put on evening and weekend clinics, thinking this would make it easier for people to attend. Staff availability was occasionally a problem, but these clinics are now very established and popular, and bookings are good. We're also in the process of setting up an online booking system and an easy way to change your appointment online. There have been a couple of technical issues with this, but we expect it to start hopefully this month. We're also going to run focus groups with the G0 group, so both engaged and disengaged if possible. And we'd like to ask them what would make them come to a clinic and stay engaged with the study, and see if we can arrange things to make that more likely. At the moment, G0 recruitment is good, so we're holding off doing that group till maybe later this year. We're also hoping to use GPs as sort of participant information centre. So we're going to target the 17 GPs in the postcodes with the highest percentage of disengaged participants, as you saw a couple of slides ago. And together, the list size of these 17 GPs is about 1 million participants. We've been talking to the Clinical Research Network about funding text messages to anybody who is in the right age group to potentially being a G1 or a G0 participant. And we did successfully get awarded funding from the CRN, and we're intending to start texting later on this year, maybe spring, summer. As far as communication strategies with the participants go, we are communicating with them usually using primarily social media such as Instagram and Twitter to focus on the fact that we're providing virtual visits if necessary and evening and weekend slots. And we're also tailoring our communications for different groups. So we're going to talk about the financial motivation to re-engage, and we're going to talk a bit about the sort of data that we collect in the clinic and the methods that we use to do that. We've investigated better ways to pay incentives to get people to re-engage, because research shows that that is the most effective way. We investigated using a back system. However, that hasn't worked because the university doesn't support that kind of activity, so we're not going to pursue that. But we are going to pay a reconnection incentive for people who disengaged and come to the clinic, and possibly a prize draw. We did worry a bit about the ethics of paying people who haven't contributed to the study for many years, when people who are well engaged and loyal don't get these payments. But we decided to go ahead with this in the end, and the ethics committee were happy with that. And that's going to cost about £4,000, which isn't a huge amount of money. So that's phase one, which is complete. We're hoping to start phase two maybe in the spring this year. As far as clinic setup goes, we're going to start up a bring a friend or family member activity, and the original cohort member will get £10 for each person they bring along. We're also investigating collective data in a van, which could be parked in, for instance, supermarket car parks. And we're going to offer home visits to make it easier for people to attend and to offer some data. We're also going to continue to use GPs to text potential G1 and G0 participants, and we might do this annually. We're also hoping to put a video or a poster up in GP surgeries to advertise the clinic. We've been talking a bit more to the Clinical Research Network about how to bring GPs in who haven't shown any interest in helping with this, but that's work in progress. And we're also hoping to improve, so the G2, so these are the babies of the original cohort children, recruitment there by engaging with health visitors and midwives. And we're talking to the clinical commissioning group about that. We're also trying to get a presence in sports club and community centres, which will advertise the clinic. And we're also going to target these special disengaged groups that I mentioned previously. So those who were withdrawn before they were 18, we're going to be sending them a letter and a leaflet. We're going to fully review the safeguarded group and send a bespoke letter with a re-engagement pack. And those disengaged participants who said they didn't want to go to a clinic, we're going to do a full review of those and send a re-engagement pack which will offer help and support. Thank you very much. I hope you found that interesting, and I'd be very happy to answer any questions.